Morning glory, America, evening grace to the rest of you listening late. Governor Doug Burgum is now Secretary of the Interior. Doug Burgum, he joins me from Washington, D.C. Secretary Burgum, welcome. It's the first time I've talked to you in your new job. I hope you're having fun.
I'm having a blast, Hugh, and it's great to be on with you.
Well, I want to start right out of the gate. Wall Street Journal notes this morning that there are 47 million acres owned by the federal government, 7.3% of all federal land, that's it. But it falls within metropolitan areas that need more homes. If you entitle that and you clear off the NEPA, CEQA, Endangered Species Act, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act obstacles, entitle it, turn it over to BlackRock, you can get 1 million homes built. You can get 10 million homes built, and you can make a lot of money to reduce the debt. Are you going to do that?
Well, we're certainly taking steps to try to help on what is a national housing crisis. As you know, Hugh, we've had housing starts have fallen way behind household formation. I mean, there's some estimates that for our active workforce right now, 10 million homes are needed. So this would, and land cost is a big part of it, and particularly in our communities out west, where the federal government owns 80% of Nevada plus 60% in Utah. We've got some fast-growing, low regulation states that are attracting businesses, and they just don't have the land to be able to do that. So when a shortage of land is driving up the cost of housing, so we can be a part of that.
Yeah, I spent 3 years. I'm a retired lawyer. I spent 3 years trying to get the BLM to sit down with the city of North Las Vegas and one of my old clients to do a giant land swap. It never went anywhere. BLM had no interest in doing anything, Mr. Secretary. Do you think you can get the bureaucracy to move to actually put land like Lincoln did into the private sector?
Well, we certainly can in southern Nevada because there was a powerful senator named Harry Reid that passed the Southern Nevada Lands Act, which gives us more flexibility in southern Nevada and Clark County than any place else in the country to go effectuate what you just described.
All right. Mr. Secretary, let's talk about the other resources, because I've been listening to a book called The Prize by Daniel Yergin. For 150 years, we just gave away everything that the United States had when it came to oil and minerals and coal, et cetera. You're not giving anything away, but are you going to sell it or lease it or do a profit split on it?
Well, the current approach, of course, is to actually do what we have this enormous resources. And by the way, I love that you bring up the prize and Daniel Yergin. I was interviewed by him on stage. What an honor. I mean, The guy's got such a great perspective. At one of the big events down at CERAWeek, which is the largest global energy conference. So, but wasn't the first time, but it was still very cool to be interviewed by Daniel on stage. And then I saw him this last weekend at another conference. So I saw him twice last week. He's incredible. That book is amazing. But I would say that everyone knows that the United States has got $36.5 trillion of debt, because that gets pounded into all of us every time there's a presidential election. And that's a number that almost any politician can repeat, $36.5 trillion. And if you ask the general public, or ask the same politician, say, hey, what's our national assets? No one has an answer, because we don't even really keep a balance sheet at the federal level. We need to. One of the things that this administration, from Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, Chris Wright, myself, anybody that's involved in trying to balance the budgets, like, we got to understand what the asset side is. And if you take just interior alone, there's 480 million acres. The number you had earlier was the stuff that's near urban areas. 480 million acres of surface, 700 million acres of subsurface, 2.5 billion acres of offshore acreage, that could be rich with critical minerals as well as oil and gas. All of these are on the assets of our country. And if every family owns a piece of those liabilities, then every family owns a piece of these assets, and our job is to go get a return. Interior, if it was a standalone company, the Department of the Interior standalone company would have the largest balance sheet of any company in the world. And we would also, if you ranked us up against every other large balance sheet company, we'd have the poorest returns. Because under the Biden administration, we restricted or slowed down everything from giving a grazing lease. If we have a grazing lease to a rancher in Wyoming, they send a check to the federal government. If we have a timber lease, they send a check to the federal government, as well as help clean up our forests. If it's an oil and gas lease, they bid on and pay us upfront lease sales to develop. And as you said, they give us a royalty going forward without us having to take any risk. We don't have to buy the equipment, hire the employees, whatever. We get a percentage at the gross, sometimes as high as 18% of the gross comes back into the Treasury. So if you want to help balance the budget in America, one of the things we do is we go out and get a return on the assets that belong to the American people. And when these acreages are put away, I'm not talking about our national parks and the last best places. I'm not talking about wilderness areas. I'm talking about the fact that we have hundreds and hundreds of millions of acres above and below ground that were put there for the benefit and the use of the American people, and that's what we intend to do in this administration.
I want to talk to you about coastal drilling. I spend most Saturdays down at Huntington Beach, and there are drills off there. It's much safer now to do slant drilling from the coast, but you can still do platform drilling. California Coastal Commission gets in the way. They can be preempted. If you go to the Congress and say, put in the Budget and Reconciliation the authority for us to drill off the California coast, the Gulf Coast, the Atlantic coast, you'll be rolling in dough and they can make the tax cuts permanent. But you got to get the California Coastal Commission and the NIMBYs out of the way. And by the way, they don't screw up the landscape. They don't cause spills. It's perfectly safe.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct on all accounts, Hugh. And again, with California and New York, California used to be a great energy producing state. New York has the potential to be one now with the Marcellus. These are two states that have the highest out-migration, among the highest taxes in the country. They've got some of the biggest urban issues of anybody in the country, and they could be lowering taxes because they could also be participating in helping America with energy independence, helping us sell energy to our friends and allies in the fields that are off the coast of California. There is one there that we think we can get restarted. It's 40,000 barrels of oil a day. It's one of the projects that we're working on as part of the National Energy Dominance Council. And again, I would encourage anyone in California that's listening if you care about the environment in those two states, then you should be insisting that we do the energy development in the United States because we do it cleaner, safer, smarter, healthier than anywhere else in the world. And then that will help lower your taxes, help you pay for schools, help you pay for roads. Just like there's a reason that places like Texas have no income tax, and there's places like New York have the highest because Texas is willing to safely and smartly and cleanly develop the resources that they have.
Can we talk about placing and monetizing small modular reactors, Secretary Burgum? Because I didn't know anything about SMRs until I sat down with you for dinner one night, and you gave me an education. I'd like the country to know SMRs are safe. They can raise the level and reliability of our grid. They can be protected against Chinese Communist Party hacking, and they can make us a lot of money and power the future.
Yes, they sure can. In the first S in the small modular nuclear reactor in the SMRs is that they're small, and it's also a modular in the sense that these when a design is approved once, they can be built in a factory and they can roll out. And as you build more units in any business, as you produce, the 10th, the 20th, the 30th, the 40th small nuclear reactor, when you're doing those, you're lowering the cost. And so we can get the cost down, and we've got, clean baseload electricity. It's persistent. It runs 24 hours a day, runs for years. All of the issues with nuclear waste are also in a completely different category, meaning much smaller problem, smaller footprints. And whether you're a military base, somewhere in a remote part of the world, or if you're Alaskan fishing village that's hundreds of miles away from the nearest road. I mean, we have communities in America, like in Alaska, that don't have roads. The cost of trying to string transportation to those places it's very difficult. I mean, these are the perfect answers for us to get electricity to everyone at low cost remotely. But timing-wise, there's a lot of innovation. The private sector is back in. We've over-regulated and killed this industry like a lot of industries in America the last 30 years. Innovation is flourishing in the nuclear space, but we're talking 5 to 7 years before these things start rolling out. Some are being built right now and being prototyped and being brought forward, but it's not going to help us in the short term. We have an electricity crisis. It's one of the reasons why President Trump declared a national energy emergency, and the way we're going to fill that gap right now with the clean, affordable, reliable base load, natural gas is going to be the play in the next few years. And if we don't do that, we're going to not. Electricity becomes intelligence. electricity becomes intelligence. We're manufacturing intelligence in these AI data centers, and it's whoever's got the most electricity wins. And China is adding electricity like crazy, and the U.S., we've got to catch up in our electricity production.
Stand by for 30 seconds, Secretary Burgum, while I send the note down the line that we're going to go to break and come back with Secretary Burgum during the break, and then he'll be back after the break. We got a lot to cover because there's a lot of money to be made, a lot of progress to be put into place, and a lot of initiatives to get going. Secretary Burgum's working 24/7, 365 at the Department of the Interior, along with Chris Wright in Energy, Scott Besson at Treasury, and the Republicans in the Senate to get this stuff going, and we need it to go fast. President Trump wants to go fast. I'll be right back with Secretary Burgum. Don't go anywhere.
The Hugh Hewitt Show is now available on TV. Go to salemnewschannel.com or download the app. You can also watch on Roku and Fire Stick. Salem News Channel, the antidote to the mainstream media.
I am back with Secretary Burgum during the break. Secretary, are you working with Scott Bessent and the Republicans to help them figure out how to add revenue to the reconciliation budget process via the sale or lease of our resources so they can make the tax cuts permanent?
We sure are, and I would say that everybody across the administration is working with their, respective, because, Senate leaders, congressional leaders, we've got responsibility for it because there's all these ways we can do it. I mean, one of the things that President Trump has advocated for, is fighting for, is for us to get the Constitution pipeline built across New York. It's a 124-mile, very simple-to-build pipeline, taking natural gas from Pennsylvania, low cost and clean, get it connected into the Northeast. We've got people stranded in Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, in New England, paying some of the highest prices in the country for electricity and for heating their homes. I mean, one estimate is that a family would pay $2,300 less a year in a place like Connecticut if that pipeline got built. It got killed twice by New York and Cuomo not giving a single water permit to cross a stream. And so President Trump, national energy emergency, we get that thing built. When you do that, what do we also have? We have a program called Low Income Heating Assistance Program. One of the things we're looking at right now in real time is how much money are all of the taxpayers that are listening from the taxes they pay to the federal government that go to pay for someone to help cover their heating bills in New England. Maine, 80% of the people are heating their homes with heating oil. Where that heating oil is coming from? It's coming from overseas. I mean, you can go to Boston on any given day. Prior to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we were offloading 400,000 barrels of oil a day equivalent of things like Russian natural gas, because between the Jones Act and no pipeline, we had foreign oil coming into New England. We have foreign oil that comes into Southern California at Long Beach. Why is that? Because we block building pipelines, and then things cost more. And in a place like New England, taxpayer dollars. If we can build that pipeline, lower what we pay in taxes to those families, it's like giving them a $2,300 tax break, but then it's also giving everybody who's listening a tax break because we don't have to pay the heating assistance. That's the kind of thing that if we understand those system economics, put them in the reconciliation bill, that is permanent.
That's the music I'm looking for. If you put them into the reconciliation bill, notwithstanding any other law, notwithstanding NEPA, the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, then you build the pipeline. Is the Senate open to that? Are they working with you on that?
We're absolutely working on that, and a number of other things. We have to be able to build linear infrastructure in this country. We have to get past the day when I say pipeline, you say protest. We hurt the environment, we hurt America, we help our adversaries when we do that, and it's the same thing with critical minerals. I mean, we've killed mining in this industry, and now we find ourselves in this precarious, risky national security situation where we're China controlling 85% of the processing on the rare earth minerals that we need for national defense, for technology, and so we've got to bring it all back. We've got to bring it back to the United States.
I'm coming right back, Governor. I got to put you back on the network. Stand by. Welcome back, America. I am with Governor, now Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, one of the smartest people in America, and I'm so glad he's in Interior because it is a nightmare of an agency. I'm a retired lawyer, but I used to deal with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the BLM, the land reclamation people. I used to deal with them all the time. God bless their souls, they don't do anything. And so let's cover three things in 9 minutes, Mr. Secretary. Mining in America, liquefied natural gas, and then forestry management. Let's start with mining. Can we get the mines open and going again?
We can. There's, for the first time in decades, there's capital that's forming, coming from around the world. People see the national security risk that we have, and there's certainly an interest to hear is ideas that are being kicked around about creating a strategic critical minerals reserve, just like we have the strategic petroleum reserve. We'd have to do this for as many as 20 different minerals, but we could be stockpiling those materials here. And also, you've heard Lutnick and Besant and others, all of us talking about the Sovereign Wealth Fund. I mean, what a great opportunity if our country's going to prosper. Why don't we take and put some equity in our Sovereign Wealth Fund that was talked about creating into these mining companies.
You're an entrepreneur, Governor. You might object to this, but I've always thought that the rule of law in America that allows private equity to open up, that at least 2 to 5% of every new initial public offering ought to come into the federal treasury gratis, because we protect their intellectual property and provide the rule of law. What do you think about that as a private equity guy? That, hey, welcome to the club. You get the list, you get the trade, but you owe us 1 to 5% of the initial round.
Well, as a free market guy, I would say that sounds a little bit like a tax. But if we said, hey, we get an option, we get to decide. If you got a good IPO, we want 5% of it. We get first dibs. We could be making a lot of money for the taxpayers.
All right, fair enough. Let's go to liquefied natural gas. I saw a big announcement in Louisiana. There's got to be so much of this. This has got to be like when Beaumont, I told you, I've been reading the prize, when the gushers would get up. We must have so much liquefied natural gas, we don't even know where it is.
We have so much of it. We are so fortunate. I mean, when you take a look at our country today, now the world's largest producer of oil and gas, China, the world's largest importer. I mean, this is our big advantage. I mean, you're reading the prize. I mean, we're in a position where if we just get out of our way from a regulatory standpoint, we've got the power to sell energy to our friends and allies. We have the energy and the power here to bring prices, inflation down at home, and we have the ability to build out new electrical sources to win the AI arms race. We can do it all. The only barrier right now is the federal regulatory environment.
Now we have two barriers. One is water in some places, and we ought to be doing desalination, not trains to nowhere in the Central Valley. I don't know why Governor Newsom won't do desal. Any chance that you could do pipelines from the Great Lakes? I know it gets my friends in Ohio crazy when I bring this up, but there's a lot of water up there. Can we pipeline it places?
I think with human ingenuity, anything is possible. We've got enormous water resources in our country. Sometimes they're not just in the right places. But yeah, we're talking about one of the key things we have to do. We're building an 800-mile LNG pipeline from the North Slope of Alaska to the southern Alaska, a port that's open year-round, sell LNG to Japan, Korea, Vietnam, the Philippines, all of our allies in the Pacific. That strengthens our security there. That's a project that the president's also talked about. He included in his State of the State speech. We're going to be building amazing infrastructure in this country again, and it's part of why we're heading towards an age of abundance.
Now, I'm so glad to hear you say that. We do have one danger, which is our forests are terribly managed. That's because the habitat conservation plans that are necessary to do forest management are held up by an agency under your purview, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They do a lot of nothing at great length. Are you going to make it so that we can manage our nation's forest, our federal forest, via ACPs that come out quickly from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service?
Well, the quick answer is yes, we're going to do that. And, of course, forests are in two places. The Bureau of Land Management, we've got forests all over the West. So does the U.S. Forest Service, which is under the Department of Agriculture. Brooke Rollins and I, working together, want to have unified approaches to this. But we have to be doing forest management, and forest management includes that we give permits to allow people to have a timber industry, because when they're out there building roads, that helps with forest fire management, helps get the load down in those forests. The worst air quality we've had in our country has nothing to do with point solutions like manufacturing or power plants. It has to do with fires.
Yes.
And if we want to solve the air pollution issue in this country, we've got to get back into forest management. And when we do that, we can revive these timber towns. The mills have all closed. We're importing timber from other countries. when we've got a great history of here in our country. So, yeah, there's multiple wins. And by the way, you do that right, and the wildlife also wins. We have healthy forests, you have healthy wildlife.
And my last question is a request, Governor. Artificial intelligence is pretty amazing. If you ran the list of endangered species and subspecies that the federal government maintains through AI, and you asked them which of these species are really endangered, you'd lose half of. They're not endangered. They're not threatened. They've been put on that list because of absurd statistical calculations about past habitat loss projected into the future. Will you harness AI to straighten out the ESA list?
Well, we're going to harness AI as we did in North Dakota to try to improve government every which way we can. And that's a great application that you've described. And we want to get to a culture where in America we're celebrating when a species comes off the endangered species list as opposed to celebrating when they go on. But some people celebrate because when they go on, it means fundraising for the groups that are, anti-fossil fuels, anti-U.S. energy. And I would say the last thing on AI, not only can we go through the list, but I would stay tuned. I mean, this is advancing so fast. I mean, one of the things that we're going to see, I predict, in the not too distant future is that we're going to see de-extinction. I think we're going to be able to bring species back with AI.
I think you can too. I also hope in those reconciliation talks you have with the Senate, you strip citizen standing out of the Endangered Species Act because it's just abused by people to stop projects that we need. Infrastructure, housing, forest clearance. You know this drill, Governor. You were a governor. You know how these laws are abused by no-growth extremists.
Absolutely, I do. And when I left office on December 15th, at the end of 8 years, we still had 30 active lawsuits going against the federal government, and that was less than Wyoming and Montana and Idaho and Utah. All have got greater portions of their states in federal land. They had even more lawsuits. I mean, we've not only tread on citizens and private sector rights, but the federal government. One of the most weaponized laws in history has been the Endangered Species Act, and states across the West were fighting back.
Last question is a fun one, Governor. How much fun is it working with Donald Trump and the cabinet? What's the energy level like?
Energy level is through the roof. It's incredibly fun. America needs to know. I mean, not only have the hardest, working president perhaps ever, but when he does an executive order, he does an EO. It's not just a photo op. In that EO, it says, Secretary Burgum, Secretary Chris Wright, shall do in 15 days or in 30 days. There's very specific executive action which we're being held to. So he's being clear in his direction. He's empowering us to get our work done. He's holding us accountable. That's what great leaders do, and that's happening every day in this administration. It's really fun.
Secretary Burgum, thank you for joining me. Good luck in every single line item that I've gone through. We've gone through a lot. Get out there and beat the Chi-Coms because they're making coal like we never. They're just digging up coal like by the gazillion acres.
Yeah, well, 194 gigawatts of coal that China's brought on in the last 12 months. 1 gigawatt would cover Denver, so that's like the equivalent of power generation for 2 Denvers a week for the last year. They're the largest CO2 emitter in the world, and they're doing all that because they want to beat us in the AI arms race. We can't lose.
Thank you for that, Mr. Secretary. Have a great day. Always a pleasure. Come back anytime and enjoy the prize. I'm jealous that you got to sit down with Dan Yergin. What a book. Thank you, Secretary Burgum.